Good morning. You guys are the first ones here. Welcome to the shop. Have you been here before? Have you been here before? Well, welcome. This is our hot shop. That's just what you call a glass blowing studio because it's really hot in here. Oh, yeah. Nice.
That's what we were excited about.
Yeah. Well, today we have Kiley is the name of the artist here. The rest of the team is the Museum of Glass team. They're all working together today to make some of his work. Some of the examples were up on the screen a minute ago, but now there's a video to give you a better point of view of the team on that side of the studio. Yeah. My name is Shannon. If you have any questions, just let me know. I got my little binder over there with all the info if you have any questions. Yeah. Here's some example of some of his work that we're doing today. Yeah. So these are all going to get attached to a wall, and with the light shining on it, it'll cast some really cool shadows. So can we show some of Kiley's work on the screen, please? So there's a couple slides here that'll go through to show you the artist's work. So the way the team makes these is they take two separate bubbles of glass and they smash them together. So you're only seeing part of the process here. They're doing the hot shop part of the process. There's also what's called the cold shop, and that is a separate studio that's behind here underneath all that area. And it's like it's where you can cut and grind and polish the glass. So they'll make the bubble, and then they'll put them into these big black boxes. Those are called annealing ovens. The glass will cool down slowly inside those, and then once it comes out of the box, then they'll take them in the cold shop. They'll grind and polish and cut parts of them away to make these effects. Hi. Have you guys been in here before? Oh, okay. So since you're all new to the hot shop, I'll give you a quick overview of what's happening. So hot shop is a name for a glass blowing studio because it's really hot in here. There's a hot shop and then there's a cold shop. The cold shop is where you work on the glass when it's cold. The hot shop is where you work on it when it's hot. So we have two furnaces in here. Could we show the furnace diagram on the screen? So this is where it all starts. We've got two furnaces. They're over there getting glass out of one of the furnaces right now. So the furnaces are powered by natural gas and forced air. The furnaces also hold about 1,000 pounds each, and they run all the time. That's what keeps the glass molten. Inside that furnace, it's about 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. And it keeps all the glass inside a big bowl called a crucible. So that diagram is like if you cut the furnace in half, that's what you would see on the inside. The natural gas and forced air keeps the glass hot, and you scoop it out the same way you'd get honey out of a jar with a stick. So clear glass looks orange when it's molten, so they're building up layers of clear glass and blowing a bubble and then adding color at some point along the way. The color comes in bars like this. So we buy bars of color, and then you heat these up and you add them to the piece. So we don't make the color. Glass chemists or chemists that specialize in glass will add different metal oxides, and that's how you get the color in the glass. We buy the bars from the store, and then you heat them up and you can add them to the clear glass in layers. The glass blowing is essentially a layering process. You build up the layers and then blow the bubble. They're gonna take, you guys weren't here when I was explaining to these two what they're doing, but they're making these pieces over here. Our artist today, his name is Kiley, and he's working with the hot shop team of the museum to make some of these pieces. It's gonna be an installation. So you take two bubbles, you get them hot, you smash them together, and it makes these, if you can see those from where you're sitting. But those get mounted on the wall, and when then the light shines on them, it casts a really cool shadow. So there will be a number of them lined up on a wall with the lights on them, and it'll be a pretty cool installation. We've got some pictures of his work. If we could show some more of John Kiley's work up on the screen. So 2 bubbles get smashed together in the hot shop, and then once it's cooled down, they go to the cold shop, which is like a place where you can grind and polish the glass. They'll cut parts of the bubble off and then polish the edges to make these shapes. So it's a multiple day process. We're doing the first part today. Once the glass is in the shape they want, it'll go into those big black boxes called annealing ovens, and the glass will cool down slowly. And then once it comes out of the box, they'll take it into the cold shop and carve away, grind and polish, and cut the glass to make these sculptural shapes. So they're getting 2 of the bubbles right now ready to smush together. And when both of the bubbles are ready, they'll meet at the center bench and put them together. Hot glass will stick to other hot glass. So they'll get them hot and put them together. It's a pretty cool process. So our artist, John Kiley, is over at that bench in the black shirt. That's John Kiley. And the rest of the team is the Museum of Glass employees and team members. Glass blowing is really a team sport, so they're all working together to make these pieces. And I'll really quickly just mention John Kiley, our artist. He uses primary geometric forms as architecture for his glass sculptures. His work has been exhibited at galleries and museums around the world. He's been a visiting instructor at the National College of Art and Design in Dublin, Ireland, the Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design in Jerusalem, Israel, the Pittsburgh Glass Center, and Pratt Fine Arts Center in Seattle. He's worked and demonstrated in multiple countries. We've got Finland, Ireland, Mexico, Italy, Japan, Bulgaria, China, Australia, Brazil, and Turkey. So he's been to a lot of different places making this work. So they're getting ready to smush these two bubbles together at the center bench. If you can't see them down here, you can look up at the screen to get a better view of what's going on. But they're smushing the two bubbles together that creates this like flat part in the middle. So this is just part of the process here. We're making everything with the hot glass today. Once this glass cools down and the pieces are cold enough to touch, you can take them into what's called the cold shop, which is where you can cut, grind, and polish the glass. So they're making these spheres, which they will then cut the sides. So this is a similar piece. This one's just cold and has been worked and finished. They'll mount these onto the wall, and then with the right lighting, it'll cast a shadow of whatever color the glass is. And there's going to be a bunch of them in a line or like in a organized way on the wall. So it's like a installation. Could we show John Kiley's work on the screen, please? Yeah, so there's some examples as well. John Kiley is the one in the black shirt sitting at the middle bench with the piece right now. That's our artist, and the rest of the crew is the hot shop team helping him make his work. Glassblowing is a very team-oriented sport, so they're all working together to make this piece for John Kiley. All the glass that we start with is clear, even if it looks orange. That little bit of glass they just added to the piece is just clear. It's just really hot, so it looks orange. It's fresh out of the furnace. It's about 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. And as it cools, it gets stiffer and colder. So you can see, since there's a lot going on, there's a lot of communication. There's multiple parts moving around. We got 3 benches, 2 furnaces, and 3 reheating chambers. So the furnace is where all the clear glass is sitting molten in a big bowl inside the furnace, just staying hot. The reheating chambers are used to reheat the glass that you've already taken out of the furnace that you're currently working with. If the glass gets too cold, it cracks from thermal shock. So you have to keep it in a specific window of temperature. That's why you keep seeing the glass artists get up and take the pieces to those big barrels of fire. They're reheating the glass to keep it in that window of temperature so it doesn't break. But we just finished one of the pieces. Let's give the team a big round of applause for another successful piece in the box. They're just going to be making a bunch of these today. So if you missed the beginning of that process, they're going to do another one. All of the colors in glass look orange when they're hot, but we're going to be working with a couple different colors here today. Examples of how the color starts, we've got on this table over here. They look like black bars, but these are all transparent glass colors, and they're all very condensed. So this is just a solid bar of glass. This is a transparent color. This is a blue. They got little stickers on them that label what color they are. We buy these from the store. So we buy all of the bars, and we use them to make the glass with the different colors. We start with clear glass, which is like the blank canvas. That's why the furnaces are full of clear. And then you preheat little pieces of these bars. You can cut them up into little chunks. You preheat them in little ovens. We have ovens that preheat the bars. You can pick them up on the end of a stick, heat them up, and melt them down into the same temperature as the clear glass, and then add them to your bubble to create a layer of color. So we got a bunch of different colors over here. I'm not sure exactly which ones they're using today, but they're all the ones they're using are in this big silver box, heating up, getting warm so that we can take them out and melt them the rest of the way. If you took a solid bar of this cold color and tried to put it in the fire, it would explode from temperature shock. So you have to preheat these before you put them into the fire. The reheating chambers are the same temperature as the furnace. So if you took a cold bar of glass and put it into a furnace that's 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, that's too quick of a temperature change. The glass doesn't like to change temperature too quick or it breaks. So there's a lot of prep work involved, a lot of preheating cold bits of glass. So the team is all working together to make these layers of glass, put the color layer in there, blow it into bubbles, smush them together to make these pieces for John Kiley. And that's our main artist here today. For those of you that joined us later, I can give you a quick biography of John Kiley, so you know who you're watching blow glass here. John Kiley is the one in the, well, saying he's the one in the black shirt doesn't help. A lot of them have black shirts on. But he's the one right here, the black shirt and jeans. That's John. So John Kiley uses primary geometric forms as the architecture of his glass sculptures. In his spherical forms, juxtaposed colors and carved optic passageways create a separation of space, allowing the viewer to peer into and through the form. Often his sculptures are balanced on edge, seemingly to defy gravity. His fractograph series takes a more conceptual approach to the material. Different methods, including impact and thermal shock, are used to shatter a perfectly polished optic blocks. The sometimes powerful explosion are filmed in slow motion and exhibited along with the reconstructed blocks. But John's work has been exhibited at galleries and museums around the world. He's been a visiting instructor at the National College of Art and Design in Dublin, Ireland, the Bezalel Academy of Art and Design in Jerusalem, Israel, the Pittsburgh Glass Center, and Pratt's Fine Arts Center in Seattle. He's worked and demonstrated in many countries, including Finland, Ireland, Mexico, Italy, Japan, Bulgaria, China, Australia, Brazil, and Turkey. So he's a pretty well-known glass artist that's been all over the world making these pieces and others like them. So there's two separate teams right now. They're both getting two separate bubbles shaped up. And once both of those bubbles are ready, they'll smush them together to make pieces similar to this. Both of the bubbles will have an opening in them, so when they get smushed together, it leaves this opening inside. Once the glass is cold, they'll take it into what's called the cold shop, and they'll cut parts of the bubble away, leaving little sculptures like these. They get mounted on the wall, and then lights shine on them, and since the color is transparent, the light will go through it, refracting and reflecting the glass, making the shadow that casts on the wall whatever color the glass is. And it's a pretty cool effect when there's a bunch of these all together and cluster on the wall. There's a bunch of really cool shadows and colors. So he's creating a bunch of these pieces to create an installation. He's working with our Hot Shop team to accomplish that today. So he'll be making a bunch of these bubbles that get smashed together and then cut and shaped and then mounted on the wall. It's a multiple day process. So you're gonna see the hot shop part of the process, which is working with the glass when it's liquid and molten. And then tomorrow when the pieces come out of these big black boxes after cooling down, then we can take them to the cold shop, which is behind the hot shop on the other side. They'll grind and polish and shape to finish the sculptures and then mount them on the wall. What they're doing at the middle bench right now is called a punty transfer. They want to work on the other side of the bubble, so they have to take it off the blowpipe by attaching it to a different rod, and we call that rod the punty. It's just the rod that we transfer the piece to. Punty is an Italian word for bridge, because the punty is how we're going to get to the other side of our piece. So they're breaking it off the blowpipe by using thermal shock on purpose to purposefully break the glass in a controlled way. So they just broke it off the blowpipe and flipped it around. Now the opening of the bubble is on the outside, so they can open it a little bit, and then they have another bubble over there for the same reason. They're going to smash those two bubbles together, and we'll have that opening inside the piece. Putting the two bubbles together is going to happen at the middle bench. So if you can't get a good view of the middle bench, we also have it up on the screen, so you can see a better view. Sometimes whenever glassblowers are all working on a team, they kind of crowd around that area, so if you don't get a good view of it, you can see it better up there. So they're about to do the punty transfer on the other bubble over there on that side of the studio. We're getting pretty close to getting to the point where we'll put the two bubbles together. Glass blowing is all about temperature and timing, so they're lining up their temperatures and timing so that we can do what needs to be done at the center bench. They've got to open that hole up just a little bit, and then the punty transfer over there, they're going to transfer it so it's flipped around and then open the hole of that one. Then they'll meet at the center bench and put the two together. They'll stick that bubble over on the right side of the studio onto the center bench's bubble, and then they'll break the piece on the outside of the bench off of the punty. So thermal shock, if the glass gets too cold, it cracks. So we generally don't want that to happen, but to get the piece off of the pipes, you use thermal shock on purpose in a controlled way. If you put a drop of water on the glass at the right temperature and the right timing, it creates a crack. So when you tap on the pipe, the glass breaks where you put the crack. So it's a strategic way of breaking the glass so that you can get it to attach to where you want. So we're going to see that happen here in just a few minutes. The whole time they're working with the glass, it's not any colder than about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. If it gets under that, you risk breaking it from thermal shock. If the glass is too cold too quickly, it'll break. So they have to keep it above 1,000 degrees or around there. But it looks like we're getting ready to smush the bubbles together. Smush is a technical glassblowing term. I'm just kidding, it's not. So you can see we got the openings on the two bubbles. Hot glass sticks to other hot glass. So they got them really hot. They're pushing them together. And then they'll take the one that John Kiley has on the outside of the bench over here off the punty. Ben is the one sitting at the bench. So they tapped the pipe. They did it really quick, but they tapped the pipe and it broke that spot where it was weakest. And now the bubble that was on the separate rod from the right side of the studio is now attached to the other bubble, and they're just going to work on that shape. Once it's the right shape, kind of a sphere, they'll take it off the pipe and put it into that big black box over there called the annealing oven. That is where the glass will cool down slowly and systematically. That way, the thermal stress won't break the glass. So it has to cool all at the same temperature slowly, otherwise it gets stressed out. You know, glass goes through a molecular change as it cools, so that has to be done in a controlled environment. That slow cooling of the glass is called annealing. So they will anneal the glass overnight. When it comes out of the box, they'll take it into the cold shop where they'll cut the ends of the bubble off so that it just has that part that got smushed together in the middle. They're making a bunch of these because they're all going to get mounted on a wall as like a series of pieces all together, like an installation. And when you shine the light on a piece of transparent glass, whatever color it is will cast a shadow on the wall of that color. So if you mount this on the wall and you shine a light on it, it'll cast a purple shadow of this shape. It's pretty cool shape or pretty cool reflection that these pieces will have on the wall. Could we show some of John Kiley's work on the screen so we can get a better idea? Yeah, these are some of his finished pieces. They're not all this size. He makes ones that are bigger, more of like solo pieces, and then he makes smaller ones that he puts on a wall as like a installation. So he's making the smaller ones today for this installation, but he makes pieces like these. This one was done in a similar way, but then when you take it into the cold shop, you can cut and grind bits of it off to make this like sculptural shape. So you're only seeing part of the process today. So this piece has just been finished. They're going to take it off of the pipe, load it into the annealer. Let's give them a big hand for another successful piece. Trent is the one loading it away. He's got some Kevlar gloves that allow him to grab the piece and put it into the oven. The oven, or the annealer, sits at about 950 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's like a resting temperature for the glass. It sounds really hot, but for glass, that's pretty cold. 950 degrees Fahrenheit, the glass isn't hot enough to do anything with, but it's also not cold enough that it's going to break. So it's like a resting temperature. All the pieces we make today will go into the annealer and sit at that temperature. At the end of the day, they'll start the program that's on the annealer. It's got a little computer system on the side of it. They'll start the program that will systematically cool the glass down overnight. So it'll go from 950 to the temperature inside this room. So tomorrow we can take everything out. It'll be cold to the touch, and then they can take it into the cold shop and cut the sides of the bubbles off to make these little sculptures. So today we're just making a bunch of the spheres. When they come out of the annealer, we'll have a bunch of them we can take into the cold shop and make into these pieces. They'll get mounted on the wall, and then we'll have an installation of these pieces by John Kiley. So they just finished one. They're kind of regrouping to start another one. We've got all three of the benches open and being used today, so you can check out all three of them, see what's going on. There's a lot of moving parts with glass blowing, so the people at this bench will be doing something different than the ones on the other side of the studio. So there's lots going on. You can check it out, see all the different parts of the process. Right now they're kind of regrouping, and we'll get started again shortly. But we showed a few slides of John Kiley's work. We also, in between, while they're resetting, we've got some videos for the artists. We've got a Meet the Artist video, so you can learn more about John Kiley. If we could play that video, please.
My name is John Kiley. I'm from Seattle, Washington. Born and raised, fourth generation. So I have two pieces here today. This one right here was actually made at the Museum of Glass in 2008, June of 2008. One of the themes that is common in my work is this membrane between two different sections. Sometimes there'll be a passageway through the membrane to the other side, and sometimes it'll just be solid. The idea behind this work is exploring this idea of connection and separation. I use glass to describe the connection and the separation because of the transparency of the material. You can see through from one side to another. You'll rarely see opaque colors used in my work, and that's because it's important for me for there to be transparency in the form. The form is not just about the exterior, but it's about what's going on in the inside too. Part of what I intend to do with the residency is push the scale, try to make these a bit larger, which is only possible with a facility like the Museum of Glass and with a big skilled team, and also increase the number of sections. Right now, I've made them up to 3 sections, and I hope to experiment with making them up to 4 or 5 sections, and then cutting away perhaps the sides and creating whole new forms. Again, still rooted in the sphere, and still rooted in the connectedness and separation, but totally different. It's really important as an artist to have an environment to be able to come and work in where you can experiment and you can push new things without financial consequences. As a glass artist in particular, for me to make my work outside of a facility like the Museum of Glass runs up to $2,000 a day. So there's pressure to produce in a situation like that. With a residency like the Museum of Glass offers, you can come in, you can just focus on your ideas, you can focus on making your art, and there are no other places where that's possible. And looking forward to a great week.
So that gives you a little bit of background on John Kiley, our artist today. He's working with the Hot Shop team here at the Museum of Glass. He's working on, if you joined us just recently, I'll give you a quick recap of what's going on. He's making a bunch of pieces for an installation he'll be doing. So they're similar to these pieces over here. He's making a bunch of these little pieces. Right now he's doing the hot shop part. There's also a cold shop part. So the hot shop is where you work with the glass when it's hot. The cold shop's where you work on it when it's cold. You can grind, polish, and cut the glass. So while the glass is hot, you can't do that, of course. So they're gonna work on the pieces to create these big spheres that have this design on the inside. It's like a little donut on the inside. Once the piece is cold, they can take it in the cold shop and cut the sides of the sphere off to make this. It has a little wall mount on the bottom, so it'll mount to the wall like this. And when the light shines through it, this is a transparent purple color, it'll cast a purple shadow. So he's making a bunch of different colors. These are how the colors start. All the transparent colors just look like black bars, but they all have labels on them. This is a green, doesn't really look like a green, but this is green glass, transparent. So similar to this color, it's like a turquoise-ish green. But this is how the colors start. You take these chunks, you preheat them in this big box, get them to about 1,000 degrees, and then you can melt them in the big reheating chambers, those big barrels of fire. You get them to the same temperature as the clear glass that's inside the furnace, which is around 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you can add the molten colored glass to the clear glass to create layers of color. So layering is a big part of glass blowing. Since the glass is so hot and molten, you can only get so much out of the furnace at a time. You have to build it up in layers. So they're adding layers of color, layers of clear glass, blowing and expanding it out into 2 separate bubbles. They take those 2 separate bubbles and they smash them together to create this inner part. And once the bubble is finished, or once the sphere is made, they put it into it. We got these big black boxes on the sides of the studios that are called annealing ovens. They'll put the glass into the annealing oven where it'll cool down slowly. Once it cools down, they'll take this into the cold shop and cut the sides off, mount it on the wall, and it'll create an installation of this really cool shadows and color. John Kiley needs to make about 50 of these. I don't think he'll make all 50 of them today. Maybe, but they're just making a bunch of the spheres today. So if you missed the beginning of this one, they're gonna do it all again soon. So you can see it's like a team sport. There's multiple benches, multiple furnaces and reheating chambers. They're all working together to make this one piece. So we've got the separate parts happening at 2 separate benches. Glass blowing is all about temperature and timing. So once they're at the right temperature and timing, they'll meet at the middle bench and they'll put both separate bubbles together. So they're lining up the temperature, getting it all in the right shape so that they can stick them together. All the colors, no matter what color it's supposed to be, will all look orange because of the temperature. If the glass gets any colder than 1,000 degrees, it will crack. And if it's over 1,000 degrees, the color is going to glow with that temperature, that energy. The heat emits light, so it looks orange. But when it cools down, it'll be different colors, like these. These all looked orange when they were being worked on in the hot shop. But that's just the temperature. I'm not sure what the actual colors are, but they're not going to be orange. There's so many. I'm like, I don't know which one this is. So John Kiley uses all different colors to make these shapes. So this one is purple, of course. And then we've got all of our colors. There's some prep work involved with using this type of color. You take these bars, and we have a tool where you can smash them to break off chunks of it. So you'd break a little chunk. You have to put this in an oven to preheat it to 1,000 degrees, and then you can pick it up on the end of a stick and add it to your piece. If you took an entire bar of colored glass and stuck it into the fire cold, it would explode from temperature shock. So you have to heat the glass up before you can use it in this way. So all the color is in this big silver box. It's just like a big hot, there's like fire inside the box that keeps that at about 1,000 degrees. So it's preheating the chunks so they can pick them up and add them to the pieces. Well, we got our bubbles. They're just on big metal straws. So they're literally blowing air through a straw to create the bubble that stretches and shapes the glass. So at the center bench, we have Ben over here who's currently drilling a hole into the hot glass. If you torch the glass in a really specific spot, it gets it hot enough that you can use a drill and essentially poke a hole in the hot glass. So he poked a hole in that one. They're pretty much doing the same thing at this bench and your far right. They're making these two bubbles, poking the holes in them so that when they squish them together, there's a hole in the inside. So what both benches are doing right now is called a punty transfer. The punty is just the name of the rod that we will transfer the piece onto. They need to flip it around. So they're going to take it off of the blowpipe by attaching it to a different rod and then using thermal shock to our advantage to break the piece off the blowpipe. So at the right temperature and timing, if you put a drop of water on the glass, it creates a small crack, which makes a weak spot in the glass. You tap on the blowpipe with a metal tool, the vibrations go into the weak spot and break the glass in that spot. So they break it off the pipe in a controlled way to flip the piece around so that we can open that little hole that we have in there. And that will be the inside of this piece where the hole is. So our two separate teams are getting ready to put these two bubbles together. They've got to line up the temperature and timing. So they're making sure everything is the right shape and the right temperature so that they can meet in the middle bench and smush the two bubbles together. So we're smushing the two bubbles together now. Gravity always wants to pull the glass down to the ground, so while they're doing all of this, they have to continually turn the pipes. So they're smushing the pieces together, turning the pipes to keep it on center. And once they like the shape and it all looks good, they'll take the punty off by breaking it, and then they'll clean up that end where the punty came off, shape it into a nice sphere, and then put it into that big black box over there called the annealing oven so the glass can anneal, which basically just means it needs to cool down slowly so that it doesn't break from thermal shock. So all the other pieces they've made today are in that box. We're going to get as many of them in that box today as we can so that we have all of our pieces for the installation that John Kiley is going to be doing. So while they're finishing up this sphere in the middle, the other two benches are getting started on the next one. So all the glass that we're using all the clear glass, I should say, that we're using starts in a furnace. We have 2 furnaces in here, and they hold about 1,000 pounds of glass each. They've got big bowls inside the furnaces that hold all the glass, and it sits inside at about 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to keep the glass liquid molten. You scoop the glass out of the furnace on the end of the sticks or the pipes, the same way you'd get honey out of a jar with a stick or a honey dipper. So that's how it starts. You build up the glass in layers by controlling the temperature and timing in which you go into the furnace to scoop it out. And in between each clear glass gather, you can add layers of color. There's also the bubble that you blow on the inside, and it stretches and expands all those layers to blow it out, make it bigger. But they're getting ready to put this piece away into the annealing oven. We've got Trent, who has on all of the gear for loading the glass into the annealer. The annealer is about 950 degrees inside, so he's got to have a bunch of protective gear because he has to physically grab the piece and put it into the oven. So the top half of his body is going to go into this 950 degree oven. So he's got all the protective gear, that way he can physically load the piece away. He's got Kevlar gloves on so he can grab the piece. Kevlar is like a heat-resistant material, so he's got these gloves where he can actually grab this piece that's about 1,000 degrees right now. He'll put it into the annealer over there. We'll shut the door, and it'll sit in there at about 950 degrees, which is a resting temperature for the glass. It won't melt, but it won't break at that temperature. Once the annealer is full, we'll turn on the program that lowers the temperature to cool it down. But we've got another piece in the box. Let's clap it up for the team. Yeah. So they finished that one. They're going to get started on the next one. While they're getting it all set up, I can give you a quick overview of our artist today. His name is John Kiley. His work has been exhibited at galleries and museums around the world. He has been a visiting instructor at a couple different places: the National College of Art and Design in Dublin, Ireland, the Bezalel Academy of Art and Design in Jerusalem, Israel, the Pittsburgh Glass Center, and Pratt Fine Arts Center in Seattle. He's worked at a number of different studios in different countries, including Finland, Ireland, Mexico, Italy, Japan, Bulgaria, China, Australia, Brazil, and Turkey. So he's a pretty well-known artist that's been around the world blowing glass and making these pieces. It's also notable that John Kiley recently received the lifetime membership to the Glass Arts Society, which is a big deal. Can we show some of John Kiley's work up on the screen, please? So this is some of his other work. We're making smaller ones today, but they're going to be a collective part of an installation. But he also makes these other works that are a bit larger. John Kiley uses primary geometric forms as the architecture for his glass sculptures. In his spherical forms, juxtaposed colors and carved optic passageways create a separation of space, which allows the viewer to peer into and through the form. And it casts these really interesting shadows of color when you shine light through them. So the installation he's working on today, he needs 50 of these spheres. They'll be mounted on the wall, and then light will shine through them to create these really cool, colorful shadows. We've got an example photo in the slides. It'll come up in a little bit. Never mind. I thought it was going to. Never mind. So they just want to make as many of these little spheres as possible. So now that we finished that last one, they're starting another one. They start on what are called blowpipes, which are big metal straws, and they literally blow through the straws to create the bubble that inflates the glass. These big barrels of fire that they're going into are called reheating chambers, or a glory hole. It's where you reheat the glass. So you have to keep the glass in a specific window of temperature so that it doesn't break. If it gets too cold, it breaks, but if it gets too hot, it's too liquid and molten and you can't control it very well. So there's this window of temperature that works best. We use the reheating chamber to keep the glass in that window of temperature and to focus the heat on the specific parts of the glass that they want to change. So each time they heat the glass up in the reheating chambers, that is a unique heat that's geared specifically towards the next move that they want to do to the piece. So each time one of them stands up with the glass and puts it back in the fire, they're heating it up to do the next move. Gabe right now is getting another clear layer of glass on top of the bubble. So he's scooping clear glass out of the furnace the same way you'd get honey out of a jar. When he comes out, he'll have a fresh layer of clear glass on top of the whole thing. It will look bright orange because the glass is molten, which makes it glow with that heat, with that energy that emits light. So it looks orange, but that is a layer of clear glass. As it cools, it'll look more clear, but when it's molten, it looks like that. So Gabe is the one with the glass. He's taken the pipe over to the pipe cooler, which is just like a trough of water. You rotate the pipe through that, and it cools the pipe down so you can hold it up higher. The glass is on a fulcrum when it's on the pipe, so if you can hold it closer to the glass, it's not as heavy and easier to work with. So the pipe cooler cools the pipe so you can hold it up higher. It's not as heavy and easier to manage. But you can see when the glass is molten, it wants to just drip onto the ground, so we have to continually turn the pipe so that gravity doesn't pull it off the pipe. So we're counteracting gravity by constantly rotating that pipe to keep the glass in the center. So just so you guys know, if you're ever interested in seeing what's going on in the hot shop, but you can't make it to the cone, there is a live stream on YouTube through the Museum of Glass channel that you can watch the glass blowing that's happening anytime they're open, anytime they're in here blowing glass, we've got that live stream happening. So if you either go to YouTube and search for the Museum of Glass, or you can go to the museumofglass.org. It has a hot shop tab that leads you to the museum's YouTube page. So if you ever just want to see what's going on, you can go on that live stream, check it out. So at the center bench, they're doing something called a punty transfer. The punty is the rod on the outside of the bench, and that's just the name for the rod we're going to transfer the piece onto. They need to flip it around so they can work on the other side. So they're going to use thermal shock to get it off the pipe at the right temperature and timing. You put water on the glass, it creates a crack, then you can break it off the pipe. So attaching it to another rod lets you flip it around. So now they can work on the other side of the piece. There's an opening from where the bubble was being blown. They're doing the same thing to the piece on the other side of the studio. They'll take those two bubbles with the opening and they'll smush them together to make this little donut inside the sphere. And then they'll cut the sides of the sphere away to make these pieces. These then get mounted on the wall so that when you shine light through the transparent color, it casts a really cool shadow. So there'll be a bunch of different colored pieces like this that all get mounted on the wall. When the light shines on it, it'll cast these shadows that make a really beautiful sculpture installation. So once both of these pieces are ready, they'll smush them together. They're just lining up the temperature and timing. Yeah. What happens if you what? All the glass we're working with is going to be anywhere above 1,000 degrees, between 1,000 and 2,000 degrees the whole time. So even when it looks cold, it's still about 1,000 degrees. If it gets any colder than that, it will break. So the specific window of temperature is where we're working, anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 degrees. The hottest the glass will be is around 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's when it's fresh out of the furnace. Sarah in the blue shirt is taking a gather of clear glass out of our furnace, and that's what it looks like at 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. That is clear glass. It just looks orange because it is molten hot. As it cools, it will look more like clear glass, but it looks orange when it's that temperature. If it gets too much hotter than that, it's really hard to control. So between 2,200 and 1,000 degrees is generally where we're working with the glass today. So now we're getting ready to smush the bubbles together. So hot glass sticks to other hot glass. When the glass is hot, it's malleable and pliable. They can smush it together and really shape it into a sphere. They're going to break it off of the pipe that John Kiley is holding there on the right side. And now both of those bubbles are attached together on one pipe. They'll clean it up to make it more of a sphere shape, and then they'll put it into that big black box over there that's called the annealing oven. Glass will go through a molecular change as it cools, and that has to be done in a controlled environment. So basically, the glass has to cool really slowly or it breaks from temperature shock, from cooling too quickly. So it'll cool overnight in that box. When it comes out, they'll take it into the cold shop, which is where you can grind and cut and polish the glass. They'll cut the sides of the spheres off to make this shape, and then they'll mount it on the wall. When you shine the light on it, it'll cast a purple shadow on this one. If you can see that on the white table, it casts like a purple shadow. All the other pieces, they're all transparent colors, so when the light shines through them, whatever color it is will create a shadow with that color. So they'll make a bunch of these little pieces that'll all be collectively part of an installation. He needs to make 50 of these, so we're just going to be making as many of them today as they can. On the far right, they're adding a layer of color to a small clear bubble. So you take these, this is color. All of it looks like black bars, but that's because they're transparent colors and all the colors very condensed into this little bar. If you look at the edges of it, you can see the color. So this is this color, this like turquoise-ish color, transparent. You would take this and melt it into a blob and then add it to a clear bubble. It creates a layer of color, so when you blow the glass out, it looks like it's that color. But it's just a layer smushed in between layers of clear. So this is how you get the bar onto a pipe, and then you melt that bar until it's the same consistency as the clear glass in the furnace. You can then drip that glass over a clear bubble, smush it down the sides. Like pulling a sock on your foot, you put the glass color around the bubble, and then you can blow the bubble. It stretches the color and the clear and gets that color on there. So we don't add color to the glass. We just put layers of glass color on top of layers of clear glass. There's glass chemists that specialize in making the color. We go buy this from the store. There's a glass color and supply store where we go as glass artists and we buy all the color. They come in these bars, and they have little stickers that label what color they are. So that's how you get the color in the glass. There's chemistry. So chemistry helps get the color in the glass, and physics helps us blow the glass. There's a lot of science behind glass blowing. But let's clap it up for these guys for another piece in the box. So they finished another one. They're getting started with making another one. They're just going to make as many of these as they can today. So there can be a lot of moving parts with glass blowing. It's kind of like an assembly line. They're going to make different parts and then meet in the middle, put them all together. So since you guys just joined us, I'll give you a quick overview of what's going on in here today. So our hot shop team here is working with our artist today's name is John Kiley. He's sitting at the bench over there in the black shirt. He's making a bunch of pieces for an installation. So they're gonna look like these pieces over here. So we're doing the hot shop part of the work today. There's also the cold shop where you can work with the glass when it's cold. So they're gonna make a big sphere of glass. They're gonna take two separate bubbles and smush them together to make this little donut shape on the inside. And then once it's cold, they'll cut the sides of the sphere away to make this shape. This gets mounted on the wall, and then when you shine light through it, it casts a shadow. If you can see on this table over here, it casts like a purple shadow from the purple glass, and it makes a really cool effect on the wall. So he's making a bunch of these pieces for an installation where they'll attach a bunch of these to the wall, the light will shine through it, and it'll make this beautiful effect on the wall of the colors. So he's got to make about 50 of these pieces today, so we're just making as many as we can. We're making two separate bubbles right now. Those two separate bubbles will get smashed together at the right temperature and timing. So the glass is anywhere between 1,000 and 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit while we're working with it. It starts like this, if you can see that little bit of glass on the end of Sarah's rod. She's the one in the blue shirt. You scoop glass out of the furnace the same way you'd get honey out of a jar, and then you can roll it on this table called the marver to shape it. You can blow a bubble into it through hollow steel tubes. So these two separate rods, they gathered glass on the end of these two blowpipes. They blew bubbles into them. They're gonna shape them up so they can attach them together. So we've got two separate moving parts for the piece right now. Once they're both ready, they'll meet at the middle bench and they'll put them together. Those big barrels of fire are called reheating chambers, and they're for reheating the glass so that they can keep it in that specific window of temperature. So right now they're doing what's called a punty transfer. They're transferring the piece off the blowpipe and onto a different one, which effectively flips the piece around so they can work on the other side while it's attached to a different rod. So the temperature and timing is how they accomplish that. At the right temperature and the right time, you can put water on the glass, which gets it cold and creates a crack. Then you break the glass on purpose on that controlled spot. So they broke the glass to get it off the pipe, but they're gonna clean up that broken spot by melting it in the fire. That big barrel of fire is called a reheating chamber, and it's for reheating the glass. We have to work in a specific window of temperature. If the glass gets too cold, it breaks, but if it gets too hot, it's too molten and out of control. So we're working anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. What we're making today is artist John Kiley's work. He's the one in the black shirt on the far right. That's our artist. Everybody else is on the team helping him make his work. So we're making pieces that will be part of an installation. This is ultimately what the piece will end up looking like. We're just making a bunch of these today. This will get mounted on the wall, and when light shines through a transparent glass, it casts a shadow. So the shadow that the light casts on all these pieces will make a really cool effect on the installation. So we're making a bunch of these pieces. It's a multiple day process. So we're gonna make a sphere that has this shape in the middle. Once the glass is cold, they'll cut the sides of the sphere off to make it look like this. But right now we're working in what's called the hot shop. You work on the glass when it's hot in the hot shop. There's also a cold shop where you work on the glass when it's cold. You can grind, polish, and cut the glass in the cold shop. So the glass, while it's hot, we can shape and manipulate and blow and twist and poke and pull and all of that. It'll cool down inside of a big black box called an annealing oven, which is the big black box on that side is the one we're using. The glass will sit in there at about 950 degrees, which is cold for glass. It'll sit in there and cool down slowly overnight. Tomorrow they can take everything out of the annealer and take it to the cold shop where they can cut the sides of the spheres off to make the final piece. But if the glass cools too quickly, it breaks, so it has to cool slowly in a controlled temperature atmosphere, the annealer. So when these pieces are finished and they put them in the annealer, they'll look like big spheres with this shape on the inside. That is made by taking two separate bubbles and smashing them together. So they've got two separate bubbles here. They're getting ready to smash them together to make the sphere. Glass blowing is all about temperature and timing. So they're lining up the temperature and timing so that they can stick these two pieces together. Hot glass will stick to other hot glass. So they're going to get the faces of these two bubbles hot so they can smash them together. And they're getting ready to do that, just lining up the temperature right now. They'll meet at this bench in the middle to put the pieces together. And this is going to be for an installation for our artist, John Kiley, right here. We need to make about 50 of these, so we're just going to be making as many of these as we can today. All the colors look orange when they're hot, but it won't be orange when it cools down. It'll be a bunch of different transparent colors like this one. This is purple. We've got a turquoise one, a yellow one, all different colors. But they're smashing those two bits of glass together right now to make a big sphere. They'll break it off with one pipe, and now both bubbles are attached together on one pipe. They're gonna shape that up to be more of a sphere shape, and then we'll have a finished piece. Over on the right side, they're already getting started with the next one. They're doing what's called a color overlay. They're laying a blob of colored glass over a clear bubble. So the color starts like this. You can see these all on the table. This is a bar of this transparent ruby. All of them look black, but that's just because they're transparent colors that are really condensed down. If you hold it in the light, you look at the edges, you can kind of tell what color it is. Like this is a turquoise, this is this color. But it starts like this. You preheat these in that big metal box right there. That box, get these up to about 1,000 degrees. You get a little bit of clear glass on a solid rod, and you stick it to this. This attaches to the end of the rod, and then you melt this to be the same temperature as the clear glass. You get it above around 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. You can then take this blob of molten glass and drop it over a clear bubble and smush it down the sides. It's called a color overlay because you're overlaying the clear glass with a layer of color. Glass blowing is essentially a layering process. So right here we've got a color bar on the end of a rod. She's going to take that into one of the heating chambers and get it extra hot so that we can add it to a clear bubble to blow out into one of these spheres so that they can get smushed together to make this final piece. Once this is cold, we'll take it into what's called the cold shop, where you can grind, polish, and cut the glass. And they'll cut the sides of the sphere off to make this final shape. It also has a little piece that they'll attach to it where it can get mounted onto the wall. So they'll have a bunch of these all mounted onto the wall. They'll shine light on it, and through the transparent color, it casts a shadow of that color. So this will cast a purple shadow on the wall, if you can see it on the table down here. And it creates this really beautiful effect. So we've got to make about 50 of these today. They're just making as many as they can in the time that we have today. Kind of working in an assembly line type of thing. So while they're finishing this piece, the other two benches are starting the parts for the next one. So John Kiley is our main artist. He's the one sitting at the center bench here. Everybody else here, employees of the museum that are helping him make his pieces. Glass blowing is really a team sport. So when you want to make something that's a big project like this, you have to hire other glass blowers to help you. So John Kiley has hired the museum employees. We got another piece in the annealer, though. Let's clap it up for the team here for another successful piece. Into the box. It'll cool down slowly inside that box so that it doesn't break from thermal shock. If glass gets too cold too quickly, it breaks. So we're going to cool it down very slowly inside that box. And now we're just going to keep going, start another one. So we've got our two separate rods with two separate bubbles. They're going to blow the bubbles out and shape them and then stick them together. Could we show some of John Kiley's work up on the screen, please? Just so you guys can get a better idea of what we're doing. So this is our artist, John Kiley. Up there, that's some of his work, some of his other pieces that he's made. He's making a very important selection here. We got to pick the right music. Got to have the right vibe in here. So when the glass is molten, it all looks orange regardless of what the color actually is. The color likes to hide behind the heat. So these will be all different colors. They just all look orange because they're in between 1,000 and 2,000 degrees the whole time we're working on them. So Sarah in the blue shirt is gathering right now. Gathering is just getting glass out of the furnace. All the glass in the furnace is clear. It sits in there at about 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit in a big bowl called a crucible, and that keeps all the clear glass molten all the time. Those furnaces are on 24/7, and the furnace holds about 1,000 pounds of clear molten glass. So you scoop it out the same way you'd get honey out of a jar with a honey dipper on the end of a stick or the end of a big blowpipe, which is like a hollow steel tube. And then you blow into the tube to blow the glass. You blow the bubble and it expands the glass. It stretches it out and makes it thinner. So glass blowing is a layering process because of how hot it is when you're working with it. You can't just scoop it all out of the furnace at once. You have to scoop it out in layers by controlling the temperature and the timing in which you get the gathers. So you can get a gather of glass, let the glass cool to about 1,000 degrees, which is cold for glass. 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, it's frozen in place essentially. So you can scoop some glass out, let it cool down, and then scoop out another layer, let it cool down, scoop out another layer, building up the layers, gather after gather, until you have enough glass. And then you can blow through the straw to inflate the glass. So we've got Ben here at the middle bench. Helping him is Stina, who's blowing into the pipe to inflate the glass while Ben is shaping it with our various hand tools. The same thing is happening at the bench on the far right. They've got two separate bubbles that they're blowing, and then they're going to smush the two bubbles together to make this design. Once the glass is cold, they'll cut the sides of the sphere off to make this. This will get mounted on the wall, and a light will shine on it. It's a transparent color, so the shadow that it casts will be whatever color the glass is. And they're going to do an installation of about 50 of these on a white wall. So when they shine the glass, or when they shine the light on the glass, it creates these beautiful shadows of all different colors. So that's what we're working on today, is making all of the spheres. When the glass cools, you can take it into the cold shop where you can grind and cut and polish the glass. And they'll cut the sides off the spheres, polish up the edges, and then we'll have our piece. So they're working on the two bubbles. The two teams are working together, trying to line up the temperature and the timing so that they can meet in the middle and put the two separate bits of glass together. At this middle bench here, Ben has a drill and a torch. If you get the glass hot enough, you can drill a hole into it. So he's superheating a specific spot to drill a hole in the glass. That way they can attach it to another hollow rod. That way when they smush the two bubbles together, that little hole he's drilling is going to allow the air to escape. That way they can smush them together and they don't distort the shape too much. There's a lot of physics in glass blowing, a lot of chemistry and a lot of physics. So drilling the hole in there is setting it up for success for when they smush the bubbles together. The air, the excess air, has somewhere to go. And the chemistry behind glass is how we get all the colors and the different formulas for different kinds of glass. We're using a soda lime silicate glass, which is the clear glass is made of soda ash, silica, and limestone. The colors are made from the same thing, but they have metal oxides added to them, and the different metal oxides give you different colors. We're using a bunch of transparent colors, so on the table here they all look like black rods of glass. But these are all transparent colors. If I hold this in the light, you can see the shadows casting is blue. So this is blue, transparent blue glass right here. But it looks like just a black chunk. That's because it's all really condensed. But you take a bar of glass, you put it right here, and then you slam this down, it chops it in half. You get little chunks. You preheat the chunks in this big metal box over here. Then you can pick them up on the end of a rod and melt them and add them to a clear bubble. And that's how you can get your different colors. So we start with clear glass in the furnace. That's like the blank canvas. That way we can take whatever colors we want and add them to the piece. So glass artists go to the glass color and supply store and they buy these different rods of different colors. There's over 300 colors we can pick from. So it's up to the artist what color they want to use. This is John Kiley's collection of his colors. John Kiley is in the black shirt on the far right. He's the artist today. Everybody else here is working on the team to help John Kiley make his pieces. Glass blowing is very much like a team sport. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot going on when you're making one singular piece. So everybody here is helping him make his pieces. And glass blowing is a big community thing. We all help each other make each other's pieces. But this is ultimately John Kiley's design and his vision and his piece. And since we got a lot of new faces in here, we have a Meet the Artist video about John Kiley, so you can learn a little bit more about him. If we could play the John Kiley Meet the Artist video, please.
My name is John Kiley. I'm from Seattle, Washington. Born and raised, 4th generation. So I have two pieces here today. This one right here was actually made at the Museum of Glass in 2008, June of 2008. One of the themes that is common in my work is this membrane between two different sections. Sometimes there'll be a passageway through the membrane to the other side, and sometimes it'll just be solid. The idea behind this work is exploring this idea of connection and separation. I use glass to describe the connection and the separation because of the transparency of the material. You can see through from one side to another. You'll rarely see opaque colors used in my work, and that's because it's important for me for there to be transparency in the form. The form is not just about the exterior, but it's about what's going on in the inside too. Part of what I intend to do with the residency is push the scale, try to make these a bit larger, which is only possible with a facility like the Museum of Glass and with a big, skilled team, and also increase the number of sections. Right now, I've made them up to 3 sections, and I hope to experiment with making them up to 4 or 5 sections, and then cutting away perhaps the sides and creating whole new forms. Again, still rooted in the sphere, and still rooted in the connectedness and separation, but totally different. It's really important as an artist to have an environment to be able to come and work in where you can experiment and you can push new things without financial consequences. As a glass artist in particular, for me to make my work outside of a facility like the Museum of Glass runs up to $2,000 a day. So there's pressure to produce in a situation like that. With a residency like the Museum of Glass offers, you can come in, you can just focus on your ideas, you can focus on making your art, and there are no other places where that's possible. And looking forward to a great week.
So that video gives you a little insight to our artist in the studio today. This piece is just about done. They've got it in a nice sphere shape. Once that cools down, they'll cut off the sides to leave that membrane in the middle to make this shape. For now, though, the piece is still about 1,000 degrees. So they've got to put it into this big black box called the annealing oven, so the glass can cool down slowly in a controlled atmosphere. If it cools too quickly, it will break from thermal shock. So they're going to put it inside the annealer where it can cool down slowly over time. That way it doesn't break. Once it comes out of there, they can take it to the cold shop and cut the sides of the sphere off to make that shape. But for now, it's going to go into the annealer and stay there for overnight, maybe a little longer. They're going to take it off the pipe and put it into the annealer. To get it off the pipe, they're going to utilize thermal shock. So if the piece gets too cold, it breaks. But they're going to purposefully break it off the blowpipe in a controlled way through the right temperature and the right timing. Trent is over there getting ready to put the piece into the annealer by putting on all the safety gear. The inside of the annealer is about 950 degrees Fahrenheit, and he has to put the piece in there physically. So he's putting on all the safety gear so that he can physically put the top half of his body into a 950-degree oven. Got the safety gear to protect him. He also has some Kevlar gloves, which is a heat-resistant material that will allow him to grab the piece when they remove it off the pipe, and he can physically walk it over to the annealer and set it inside. To break it off the pipe, we're going to use water. If you put water on the glass at the right temperature, it cracks. They'll break it off the pipe. Trent will catch it in the gloves and take it to the annealer. So water right there, give the pipe a tap, it breaks. They're gonna melt the sharp spot where it just broke and load it away. Let's give it up for the team for making another successful piece. Into the box with everything else we've made today. And John Kiley wants to make as many of these as they can, so they're working kind of in this, what do you call it, an assembly line. So they've already started the next one. The team has started the next piece, and they're gonna just continue making more of these pieces. We've got all 3 benches lit up today. We've got the furnace, which is where all the clear glass stays molten, and then we have reheating chambers, which are the big barrels of fire. There's 3 of them. The reheating chambers are for reheating the glass. Makes sense. We have to work in a specific window of temperature, anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 degrees. As the glass is being shaped and worked with, it's getting colder and stiffer. So once it gets cold and stiff where you can't do anything else, you put it back in the reheating chamber to build the temperature back up so you can continue working on the glass. So each time any of these team members stand up, put the glass in the big barrels of fire, they're reheating the glass so that they can continue working on it. The furnaces and the reheating chambers are both powered by natural gas and forced air. So that's what keeps them going. The furnaces stay on 24/7 because the glass has to stay molten inside there. But the reheating chambers get turned on and off each day. They're very insulated, so it takes them about an hour to heat up. So an hour before they started, someone came in here and turned on all the equipment, waited for it to get hot, and then they started once everything was the right temperature. So at the end of the day, they'll turn everything off, except for the furnaces. Those stay on all the time. Those stay on for years at a time, until you have to replace the crucible inside that holds all the glass. It does eventually break down from the temperature. There's a wear and tear of the bowl that holds the glass inside there. So every 5 years, they turn it off and they replace the crucible. But that's like a 2-week process. So the team finished that piece. They're gonna start up on the next one. So we've got 2 separate rods. We've added color. We're blowing the bubble to make the bubbles, and then we'll smash the 2 bubbles together. So we've got two separate parts of this piece right now. These two separate bubbles are going to get smashed together. The part that gets smashed together will create this part on the inside of the bubble, kind of like this, John Kiley calls it a membrane on the inside. So it'll be a sphere when they put it into the annealer so it can cool down. But once it's cold, they'll take it out and they'll cut the sides of the sphere off to make it this shape. And then they'll mount them on the wall. It'll be like an installation of about 50 of these. And they're made from transparent colors. So when you put light on transparent colors, the light shines through and casts a shadow. Since they're different colors, the shadows of these pieces will all be different colors. And if they're all mounted together in a cluster on a white wall and the light shines on it, it makes this beautiful pattern of all the colors, all the pieces. So this is a project he's working on, and he has the hot shop team at the museum helping him make all these pieces. So John Kiley is the one in the black shirt on the far right, sitting at the bench. He's the main artist, and the rest of the glass artists here are helping him make his pieces. Yeah, thanks.
It's okay to walk up there.
Yeah, of course. You go around that way. You can get a different view up there. So glass blowing is all about temperature and timing. The team has multiple separate pieces. We've got to line up the temperature and timing so we can put them together. So we've got one team at the bench on the right, a team at the bench in the middle, and they're all working together to create one piece. So once all of the glass is the right temperature, they'll put it all together. They're getting ready to do that part. We've got our two separate bubbles. Right now they're doing what's called a punty transfer over there. They've got to transfer it off the blowpipe and onto a solid rod so that they can take the open end of it and attach it to the open end of this one. So they're transferring it to a different rod, that way they can do that part. Once they're attached, they'll break it off the rod that they're transferring it to right now. So the temperature and timing is what allows all of this to work. There's a lot of physics and chemistry in glass blowing. Thermodynamics. So they're going to break it off the blowpipe and have it attached to a different rod. Hot glass sticks to other hot glass. So they attach that little bit of glass on that other rod to the piece, broke it off of the blowpipe, and now they're going to get it ready to attach it to this other piece. Once the two halves of the sphere are connected, they'll break it off of the pipe they just transferred it onto, and both of those pieces will be attached on one rod in the middle bench. So there can be a lot of moving parts in glass blowing. That's why there's 3 separate benches here. And they're trying to make as many of these as they can today. So while parts of the team are working on this piece, we've got other parts of the team that are already starting the next piece. So as soon as this one's done, they can just jump into the next one. If you look up at the screen, you can see there's a hole in that bubble that Ben has here at the middle bench. He's shaping it up and getting it all to the right temperature. When glass is hot, no matter what color it's supposed to be, it all looks orange. Even the clear glass, when it comes fresh out of the furnace, looks bright orange. So these colors are all going to be different colors, like these ones over here, if you can see these. These all looked orange when they were hot. But when they cool down, there'll be all these different, like turquoise, yellow, orange, purple. But they all look orange when they're between 1,000 and 2,000 degrees. So working with the colors is something where you really just have to trust the process, that it will be the color that it's supposed to be when it's not hot. So we're nearly ready to smush the 2 bubbles together. So here we go. They're going to smush the two bubbles together right now. And gravity always wants to pull the glass down to the ground, so they have to continually rotate the pipes in unison together so that the piece doesn't droop. So there's a lot of communication going on between them right now. They're talking about how they're rotating the pipes, the speed, when they're going to flip to go the other way, the temperature, so they know when to break it off of the pipe on the outside of the bench. They use thermal shock. So they touched a metal tool to the glass. The metal cooled the glass in a specific spot. If you tap on the pipe with the tool, the vibrations go into that weak spot and break it. So they broke the glass off the end of the piece. Now the two bubbles are smushed together to make one big sphere. They're going to clean it up, get rid of that little break point where they just took that other rod off, and then shape it up to be more of a sphere. Right now it's kind of an egg shape. They got to shape it to be a sphere. And once it's done, they'll take it off the pipe, and they'll put it into that big black box over there. That's called the annealing oven. But glass goes through a molecular change when it cools, and that has to be done in a controlled environment. That process is called annealing, which is basically cooling the glass down slowly so that the heat can dissipate without stressing out the glass anywhere where it will break. So the glass will go into that big black box and cool overnight slowly. Once it comes out, we can take it to what's called the cold shop. So this is the hot shop where you work with the glass when it's hot. The cold shop, you can take cold glass, you can grind it and polish it, and you can even cut through it. So they're going to take those spheres, and they're going to cut the sides off, but the part of the bubble that got smushed together in the middle will stay there to create this little shape. This will get attached to the wall, and when you shine light through transparent glass, it casts a shadow of that color. So they're going to make a bunch of these. They're all going to get mounted as an installation onto a white wall with lights shining on them, and the light will cast these really beautiful shadows of the different colors. So right now we're making all of the pieces so that we can create the installation. John Kiley, the one sitting at the middle bench, is the main artist, and everyone else here is helping him make his pieces. Because glass blowing is really like a team sport. If you want to make something big like this, you have to hire other glass artists to help you make it. So John Kiley's the main artist. He's asked all of the people out here today to help him make these pieces. So they're all working together to make all of these individual pieces to create an installation. So we're finishing up this piece at the center bench. We have Trent getting ready to put it into the annealing oven. The piece is about 1,000 degrees right now, which is cold for glass. You can see it's not really moving. We're going to put it into the annealer, which sits at around 950 degrees right now. Everything else they've made today is sitting in there at that temperature. That's like a holding temperature. At the end of the day, when the annealer is full of all the pieces they're making, that's when they'll turn on the program that systematically cools down the inside of the annealer. And that will systematically cool down all the glass inside there. That way it doesn't break from cooling too quickly. And that's the longest part of the process. So the glass will be annealing overnight, maybe a little longer. So they broke it off the pipe, cleaning up the spot where it broke by melting it. And let's give the team a hand for another finished piece into the annealer. Trent is wearing Kevlar gloves, which lets him hold the piece and put it into the oven. It's a heat-resistant material that he's got on. And now that we finished that one, we're going to start another one. So the team has already started the next one so that they can get through these pretty quickly. We've got 3 separate benches, and they're all working together to make these pieces. There's a lot of moving parts. So we've got one part of the piece over there. Another part of it's over there. They're going to reset a little bit and start again and make another one of those spheres. But while they're resetting, I can give you guys a quick overview of our artist, John Kiley, wherever he went. He's a local artist. He was born and raised in Seattle, but his work has been exhibited at galleries and museums all over the world, He's been an instructor at the National College of Art and Design in Dublin, Ireland, as well as the Bezalel Academy of Art and Design in Jerusalem, Israel, the Pittsburgh Glass Center, and Pratt Fine Arts Center here in Seattle. He has work and demonstrated in multiple countries, including Finland, Ireland, Mexico, Italy, Japan, Bulgaria, China, Australia, Brazil, and Turkey. So he's well known all over the world for his pieces. A lot of his work uses primary geometric forms as the architecture for his sculptures. In his spherical forms, juxtaposed colors and carved optic passageways create this separation of space, which allows the viewer to peer in and through the form. Can we show, oh yeah, some of his pieces up on the screen? That's an example of some of his other work. This installation, he's making a lot of smaller pieces, but these pieces are a bit larger. He displays them in different galleries all over the world. So that's our artist today. There he is. He's over there in the black shirt on the far right. So he's leading the team. Everyone else is working together to make these pieces, helping John Kiley for his installation. And something notable about John Kiley is that he just received a lifetime membership to the Glass Arts Society. It's a big award. It's pretty exciting. So this bubble in the middle bench is attached to a blowpipe. Ben is currently drilling a hole in the glass. So if you get it really hot, you use a drill. You can drill a hole in hot glass. They need to flip this bubble around so they can access the hole on the other side. So they're creating what's called a punty. Gabe is making the punty over there. The punty is a transfer rod. So we're going to transfer the piece off the blowpipe that it's on by connecting it to a different rod called the punty. We drilled a hole on the other end because we need there to be a hole on that end for when we put the punty on. We're going to smash the two bubbles together, so that hole is going to allow the air that we don't need to escape through the pipe that we're transferring the piece onto. There's a lot of physics and chemistry involved in glass blowing. So they're setting it up for success by drilling that hole in there. That way when they squish the two bubbles together, the air has somewhere to go. It'll escape that little bubble. But they're going to transfer the piece onto a different rod so they can flip it around and work on the other side that's holding it onto the current rod. They're going to do that for both of these bubbles. So they're trying to kind of coordinate each of these to be working the same temperature and timing. That way they can line it up to attach them together at the right temperature. So Gabe with the hat has our hollow punty that he's going to attach to the bubble where there's a hole on the end. They're going to stick that on there. Hot glass sticks to other hot glass. They're attaching this rod. At the right temperature, they can use thermal shock to their advantage to break the glass off of the blowpipe that it's on at the bench by using water. If you put a drop of water, it creates a crack. So they're going to strategically put water right there, tap on the blowpipe, and the vibrations go into that weak spot, which will remove the piece from the pipe. Just like that. Now they've flipped the piece around, they can work on the other end. They'll do the same thing for the bubble on the other side of the studio. They're currently doing their transfer. That one doesn't have a hole in it though. That's just a solid rod that they're transferring it to, because that bubble is going to get smashed onto this one, squished together to make a sphere that will have this kind of membrane in the middle of it. So once it's a sphere, they can cool the glass down and then they can cut the sides of the sphere off to make this. So they're making about 50 of these for an installation. This will get attached to the wall, and since it's a transparent color, when you shine light through it, it will reflect that color onto the wall. So they'll have a bunch of these on a white wall with light shining through it to create this really beautiful effect of the colors. They're making all different color ones. This one is purple, but they're making a bunch of different colors. We've got a couple other examples over here of all the different colors. The installation is going to be 50 of these on the wall, so they're just trying to make as many of them as they can today. So they're lining up their temperatures. When they're both ready, John Kiley, the artist, will bring the bubble he's got over to the center bench, and they'll stick them together. And gravity always wants to pull the glass down to the ground, so while they're attaching them, they'll be rolling the glass on those rails back and forth, talking to each other, coordinating how fast they're going to roll the pipes and the movement of the glass. There's a lot of communication that will be happening. You can't really hear it from where you're sitting, but they're going to be at the bench talking to each other, telling each other how fast to turn the pipe, when to stop, whatever else they need. It's a team effort to make these pieces. But the team wants to make as many of these as they can today. So while we're finishing up the piece that already has the two bubbles, these two, Sarah and Gabe, are starting the next one. So it's kind of like an assembly line. They're getting the next one started so that as soon as John, Kiley, and Ben over here at the center bench finish the one they're working on, they can just jump into the next one. Glass blowing is a layering process, so you have to build up the material layer after layer, and that takes a little bit of time. So they're getting all the layers built up so that these guys can do this part. Smush the two bubbles together. Hot glass sticks to other hot glass, so those are attached now, and it has that membrane in the middle. They'll break the punty that John Kiley is holding off the piece, and all of it will stay attached to the pipe that's on the bench right now. Now it's all attached, they just got to make that more of a sphere shape, and then we'll have another piece. So once the piece is done, it has to go into what's called the annealing oven, which is that big black box under the walkway there. Glass has to cool down slowly or it breaks. So the molecular change occurs as the glass cools. If that happens too quickly, it stresses the glass. All the molecules get jumbled and they break. They get stressed and crack. So the glass has to cool slowly so that the heat can dissipate over time without stressing the glass and breaking it. And that process is called annealing. So all the pieces that we're making today are going to go into that box, the annealer. That will systematically cool the glass down over time so that it doesn't break. And that's the longest part of the process. They're going to be in there for at least overnight, if not longer. The thicker the glass is, the longer it needs to be in there. So it'll probably sit in there for anywhere between 12 and 24 hours, cooling down systematically. And then once it comes out of the annealer and it's cold, they can take it into what's called the cold shop. This is the hot shop where you work with the glass when it's hot. We also have a cold shop where you can take cold pieces of glass, you can cut into them and grind them and polish them. So they're going to take the spheres and cut the sides of them off to show that part that's in the middle when they smush the bubbles together. So this is the end goal. They're doing the hot glass portion right now, and then they'll take it into the cold shop and cut it and polish it. The inside of our annealer is about 950 degrees. Trent has put on a bunch of safety gear so that he can take the piece and physically put it into this 950 degree box. So we got Kevlar gloves, heat resistant material that will allow him to actually grab the piece. They break it off the pipe, torch the part that's sharp, and now he's going to carry it over to the annealer and load it inside. Let's give the team a big hand for a successful piece. Another one in the box. So the team has already gotten started on the next one. They're going to continue to make another one of these spheres. So the team's going to do a quick little reset, kind of reassess where we're at to start the next one. While they're doing that, I want to let everybody know, if you ever want to see what's going on in the shop, but you can't physically make it here, we do have a live stream. If you go to the museumofglass.org and look under the Hot Shop tab, it can lead you to the live stream. You could also go on YouTube and type in Museum of Glass, and that'll show you the live stream too. But we have a live stream where you can watch the glass blowing happening. Anytime the museum is open and there's glass blowing happening, there is a live stream. So they're seeing what's up there on the screen on the live stream. So if you ever want to see what's going on but you can't make it, that's how you can do that. We've also got what's called Family Day. Every second Saturday of the month is Family Day. There's activities hosted by the education team where you can come in and learn more about glass a little bit more hands-on. Now we're getting ready to make another one of those spheres. We've got our two separate parts. Those will eventually get joined together to create our sculpture. Glass blowing is all about temperature and timing. So there's two separate teams here working on these two bubbles that will eventually get put together. So you can hear them a little bit. There's a lot of communication happening. One person sits at the bench and shapes the glass. They tell the other person over here to blow into the pipe and when to stop blowing into the pipe and anything else that they need from them. The person sitting at the bench typically is called the gaffer, which is like the lead glass blower. Our gaffer for today is over here. His name is John Kiley. He's our main artist. And then the rest of the team is just assisting him in making these pieces. John Kiley's a local glass artist, born and raised in Seattle. He has work all over the world. He's taught in several countries and demonstrated in several countries, including Ireland and Israel, Mexico, Italy, Japan, China, Australia, all over the place. So John Kiley, over there in the black shirt, is our lead glass blower. We're making these pieces as part of an installation that he will have, a personal installation from a personal commission. So he needs to make about 50 of these pieces. They're all going to get mounted on a wall, and then when light shines through transparent glass, it casts a colorful shadow. So he's going to have 50 of these all in a cluster on a white wall with a light shining on them, which will cast these really beautiful, colorful shadows. He's using all different colors. This is an example of one of them. We've got this beautiful transparent purple, if you can see this. I'm holding it under the light so you can tell a little bit better. But it casts the shadow of purple light. So he's going to make a bunch of these. Right now they're making them into a sphere, and once the glass is cold, you can take it into the cold shop and you can cut the sides of the sphere off to make this. He's making about 50 of them. So they're working in like an assembly line today to try to get as many of these made as they can. We've got our two separate bubbles right now. Once they're both ready, they'll take those bubbles and smush them together, and that's how we get this sort of membrane on the inside. So the raw material of clear glass is soda ash, silica, and limestone. And material scientists mine the earth for those materials. It's crushed up into a powder. And when all those three things are crushed into a powder and then put into a furnace and the temperature gets turned up, it melts into glass. So they take the powder of soda ash, silica, and limestone, and there's like a shovel. You put the powder in the shovel and then you shovel it into the furnace. It's called charging. So you charge the furnace full of the powder, it melts, and then it becomes a big pot full of glass. So that's how it starts, and it's all clear glass in the furnace. You scoop it out of there the same way you'd get honey out of a jar with a stick. So they take the sticks and the blowpipes, and they scoop it out the same way you'd get honey. They kind of wrap it around, and you build it up in layers. So clear glass, gather a little bit of clear glass, let it get cold and stiff, and gather more glass on top of it, building up those layers. Yeah. And then you can add layers of color in between the clear glathers to kind of sandwich them. So if you cut the glass down the side, you'll see layers of color sandwiched together. Yeah, usually it's clear glass is like the blank canvas, so you can get clear, and then we buy the color. So the clear glass stays molten in the furnace all the time. We go to the glass color and supply store and you buy bars of colored glass. So these ones, since they're not hot, you have to preheat them and then melt them, and then you can add them to a piece. So while they're working on the shape of this piece, part of the team is getting the color melted and adding them to the glass and building up the layers so that they can just pass it on and then they work on the next part. So it's kind of like an assembly line. Temperature and timing is really what glass is all about. So they just smush those two bubbles together, and now they're adding a little base to it. They'll take it off the pipe and put it into that big black box over there so the glass can cool down slowly. We got to load this into the annealer, which is about 950 degrees inside. So Trent over there is getting all geared up to load the piece away. We got to put on some safety gear because he's going to have to physically put himself into the oven to set the piece down. So he's protecting his skin with some layers of clothes and some heat-resistant material. Those gloves are made of Kevlar, which is heat-resistant, so he can grab the piece with the gloves and carry it over to the annealer and set it inside. It'll cool down inside there slowly over time, and when that comes out of the annealer, they'll cut off the sides of it to make it look like this, and then this will get mounted on the wall along with 49 other ones, all together on a big white wall with light shining on it so it casts different colorful shadows. So it's going to be an installation of a bunch of these pieces. They're just trying to whip out as many of these today as they can. So this one's almost done. The team has 2 other starts to make another one. Well, I think after this one's done, we're going to lunch, so they haven't started another one. But they're going to put this one away by breaking it off the pipe. They'll take it into the cold shop, which is where you can work with the glass when it's cold. They'll cut and grind it and clean it up. But let's give this team a hand for another successful piece in the box. And I think our team is going to take a little bit of a break and get some lunch, but we'll be back in here around 2. Oh, this is, yeah, up there it showed a picture of what everything will end up looking like. It changed right when I said that.